Zulayho often felt like a ghost in her own home. The days were just so long, stretching into this endless silence that was only broken by the distant sounds of the neighborhood. Her husband was far away, working in Russia, and his absence was this constant hollow ache in her chest. She lived with her father-in-law, in a house that was supposed to be her sanctuary, but honestly, it felt more like a cage. The walls seemed to close in on her, each corner holding a memory of a life she had dreamed of but never truly lived. She would often stand by the window, watching the world go by, feeling completely detached from the laughter and chatter of the families outside. Her heart was just filled with a quiet sadness, a longing for something she couldn't quite name. The evenings were, honestly, the hardest. As the sun would set, casting long, dark shadows across the courtyard, a heavy feeling would settle over her. She would prepare dinner in the quiet kitchen, the clatter of pots and pans echoing in the empty space. Her father-in-law would eat in silence, his presence a heavy weight in the room. There were no warm conversations, no shared smiles, just the cold, unspoken rules of a life she was forced to endure. Zulayho missed her husband's voice, his laughter, the simple comfort of his presence. She would look at their wedding photo, a picture of two young people full of hope, and wonder where that hopeful girl had gone, lost somewhere in the corridors of this lonely house. Her days were a monotonous cycle of chores and solitude. Waking up before the sun, cleaning the house, tending to the small garden, and waiting. Always waiting. Waiting for a phone call from her husband. Waiting for the day to end. Waiting for a sign that her life would change. The vibrant colors of the world outside seemed to fade into shades of gray within the walls of her home. She felt her youth slipping away, her dreams becoming as distant as the husband she barely saw. The loneliness was a constant companion, whispering doubts and fears into her ear, making her feel small and invisible in a world that seemed to be moving on without her. This profound sense of isolation carved a deep sorrow into her young heart. She was a wife without a husband beside her, a daughter-in-law in a home that offered no warmth. The future she had once imagined, filled with a bustling family and shared joy, now seemed like a cruel fantasy. She yearned for connection, for a kind word, for someone to see the sadness in her eyes and ask if she was okay. But in this house, her feelings were her own burden to carry. The loneliness was not just about being physically alone. It was the feeling of being emotionally abandoned, trapped in a life that was not her own choosing, with a silent sorrow that no one seemed to notice or understand. The discomfort Zulayho felt was not just from the loneliness, it was from the unsettling gaze of her father-in-law. His eyes would follow her as she moved about the house, a cold and distant look that made her skin crawl. It was not the protective gaze of a father, but something else, something foreign and unnerving that she could not comprehend. She tried to ignore it, telling herself she was imagining things, that her loneliness was playing tricks on her mind. She would pull her headscarf tighter, lower her gaze, and try to make herself as small and unnoticeable as possible. But the feeling of being watched, of being scrutinized, never went away. It was a silent pressure that added to the weight on her shoulders. One night, the unspoken fear became a terrifying reality. Zulayho was in her room, the silence of the house thick and heavy around her. She was about to fall asleep when she heard a faint sound at her door. Her heart began to pound in her chest. It was the sound of the doorknob slowly, deliberately turning. Fear, cold and sharp, shot through her veins. It was him. Her father-in-law was trying to enter her room. She froze, her breath caught in her throat, every muscle in her body tensed. The door was locked, but the persistent, quiet rattling was the most terrifying sound she had ever heard. It was an invasion, a violation of the only space that was truly hers. In that moment of pure terror, Zulayho felt completely and utterly alone. Who could she call for? Her husband was thousands of kilometers away. Her own family lived in another town. To scream would be to invite shame and questions she was not prepared to answer. A deep-seated cultural fear held her captive, the fear of being blamed, of bringing dishonor to her family and her husband's. She lay there in the darkness, her body trembling, praying that he would just go away. The sound finally stopped, followed by retreating footsteps, But the silence that returned was no longer peaceful. It was filled with the echo of her fear and the horrifying realization of her vulnerability. Sleep did not come that night, nor for many nights after. The sanctity of her room was shattered, and the house had transformed from a cage into a place of imminent danger. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the hallway, sent a fresh wave of panic through her. She barricaded her door with a chair each night, a small, desperate act of defiance. But she knew it was not a solution. The fear was eating away at her from the inside, and she understood that she could not continue to live this way. The incident had broken something within her, but from those broken pieces, a new and unfamiliar feeling began to emerge, the will to fight back. The next morning, Zulayho's hands trembled as she tried to perform her daily chores. The memory of the night before played over and over in her mind. She couldn't look her father-in-law in the eye. The air between them was thick with an unspoken, ugly truth. She felt a desperate need to talk to someone, to let the poison of her secret out before it consumed her entirely. Her gaze fell upon her neighbor's house, where Oisha Opa lived. She was an older, kind-hearted woman who had always greeted Zulayho with a warm smile. With a surge of desperate courage, Zulayho slipped out of the house when her father-in-law was in the garden and knocked on her neighbor's door. Oisha Opa opened the door and immediately saw the terror in Zulayho's eyes. Without a word, she ushered the young woman inside, sat her down, and gave her a glass of water. As Zulayho began to speak, the words came out in a torrent of sobs and stutters. She told her neighbor everything: the cold stares, the suffocating loneliness, and the horrifying events of the previous night. Oisha Opa listened patiently, her expression turning from concern to righteous anger. She didn't doubt Zulayho for a second. Instead, she held her hand, her touch firm and reassuring. For the first time in a long time, Zulayho did not feel alone. She felt seen, heard, and believed. The support from Oisha Opa and a few other trusted neighbors was like a lifeline. They didn't just offer words of sympathy, they gave her strength. "You are not to blame," Oisha Opa told her firmly. "You have done nothing wrong. A person's home should be their safest place." Another neighbor, a strong-willed woman named Fatima, added, "You cannot stay in that house. Your safety is more important than what people might say." Their words were a balm to her wounded spirit. They validated her fear and affirmed her right to be safe. They made her realize that staying silent was not a virtue. It was a surrender she was no longer willing to make. Empowered by this newfound support system, Zulayho made a decision that would change the course of her life forever. She would not spend another night in that house of fear. The thought was terrifying, as it meant defying tradition, her husband's family, and potentially facing the judgment of her community. But the alternative, staying and living in constant terror, was unthinkable. The neighbors helped her pack a small bag with her most essential belongings. As she quietly left the house that had been her prison, she was not running away in fear. She was walking towards her own rescue, taking the first, difficult and courageous step towards reclaiming her life and her dignity. Leaving her marital home was one thing, facing the world outside was another. Zulayho knew that her actions would be scrutinized and judged by the community. In a society where a woman's place is often seen as being within her husband's home, her departure was a radical act. As she walked through the streets towards the bus station, she could feel the weight of unspoken judgment in the curious glances of people she passed. Whispers seemed to follow her, a cloud of speculation and gossip. Why did she leave? What happened? Did she do something wrong? Each imagined question was like a small stone thrown at her fragile confidence. The pressure from society was immense and immediate. Some relatives and acquaintances were quick to condemn her without knowing the full story. They saw her as a runaway, a woman who had failed in her duty to keep the family together. They spoke of honor and shame, placing the burden squarely on her shoulders. "A good wife endures," one distant aunt had told her over the phone, her voice laced with disapproval. "You should have been more patient. You have brought shame upon your husband." These words were sharp and painful, cutting deep into her already wounded heart. They made her question her decision, filling her with doubt and guilt. Zulayho felt trapped between two impossible choices: enduring abuse in silence or facing public condemnation. The world seemed to be divided into black and white, with no room for the gray, complicated reality of her situation. It was easier for people to believe that she was at fault than to confront the ugly truth that a respected elder could be a predator. This societal pressure was a powerful force, designed to keep women in their place, to encourage silence over self-preservation. It was a test of her resolve, a battle against an invisible enemy of tradition and judgment that threatened to push her back into the cage she had just escaped. Despite the harsh judgments, Zulayho held on to the truth of her experience. The memory of the fear she felt was more real and more powerful than the whispers of strangers. She reminded herself of the support she had received from her neighbors, the women who had seen her pain and believed her. Their validation was her shield against the arrows of gossip. She was learning a difficult lesson, that doing the right thing for herself would not always earn her the approval of others. She had to find her strength not in the opinions of the crowd, but in the quiet conviction of her own conscience. This was her fight, and she was determined to win it, no matter the social cost. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, Zulayho arrived at her father's house. This was the home where she had grown up, a place of cherished memories and childhood laughter. But today, she returned not as a happy visitor, but as a daughter seeking refuge, her world turned upside down. She was terrified of how her family would react. Would they believe her? Or would they send her back to her husband's home, telling her to endure for the sake of honor? Her father, a man of few words but deep integrity, saw her standing at the gate, her small bag in her hand and a world of pain in her eyes. He didn't ask questions right away. He simply opened the gate, took her bag from her hand, and wrapped his strong arms around her. In that embrace, Zulayho finally broke down. The tears she had been holding back for so long streamed down her face, a release of all the fear, loneliness, and despair she had carried. Her father held her tightly, letting her cry until she had no tears left. His silent, unwavering support was more powerful than any words could have been. It told her that she was home, she was safe, and she was loved. He had seen his daughter's suffering, and his heart broke for her. When her brothers heard the story, their reaction was not one of shame, but of protective fury. They were angry at the man who had harmed their sister and at the husband who had left her in such a vulnerable situation. They did not for a moment doubt her word. "You did the right thing by leaving, Singlim, my sister," her older brother said, his voice firm with conviction. "No one has the right to treat you this way. We are here for you, and we will not let anyone harm you again." Their immediate and unconditional support was a powerful shield, protecting her from the harsh judgments of the outside world. With the solid backing of her father and brothers, Zulayho felt a renewed sense of strength. Their belief in her was the foundation upon which she could start to rebuild her shattered confidence. They did not see her as a source of shame, but as a victim who had shown immense courage. They stood by her side, ready to face her husband's family and the societal backlash. Their love and protection created a safe haven where she could begin the slow process of healing. She was not just Zulayho, the runaway wife, she was a beloved daughter and a cherished sister. And with her family behind her, she was no longer alone in her fight. The decision to seek a divorce was the next logical, yet daunting step. It meant formally severing the ties that bound her to a life of fear and unhappiness. When her husband was contacted, his initial reaction was one of disbelief and anger, his pride wounded. His family, trying to save face, made accusations against Zulayho, painting her as a disobedient and ungrateful wife. The divorce process became a battleground, not over assets, but over blame and reputation. They offered her a settlement, a share of the property, if she would just stay quiet and accept a portion of the blame. It was a tempting offer for a woman with nothing to her name. However, Zulayho's father and brothers advised her with wisdom and clarity. "Your freedom and your peace of mind are worth more than any house or any amount of money," her father told her. "Do not sell your truth for their silver." Zulayho understood this profound lesson. Accepting their money would feel like accepting a payment for her silence, a price for her suffering. She wanted nothing from them. She did not want any material possession that would serve as a constant reminder of her trauma. All she wanted was to be free, to have her name cleared, and to close this painful chapter of her life for good. She made a bold decision. In the presence of community elders and family members, she officially relinquished any claim to marital property or financial compensation. "I do not want your money or your property," she stated, her voice clear and steady, though her heart was pounding. "I only want one thing: my freedom. I want to be released from this marriage so I can live in peace." Her declaration stunned many who were present. In a world where divorces were often messy fights over assets, her stance was both unusual and powerful. She was not a woman seeking revenge or material gain. She was a woman seeking liberation. By refusing any compensation, Zulayho claimed a moral victory that was far more valuable than any material wealth. She walked away from the marriage with nothing but the clothes on her back and her dignity intact. It was a high price to pay for freedom, leaving her financially vulnerable and facing an uncertain future. But as she signed the final papers, a profound sense of relief washed over her. The heavy chains that had bound her for so long finally fell away. She was poor, she was single, and she was the subject of town gossip, but she was free. And for the first time in years, the future, though uncertain, felt full of possibility. The initial days of freedom were a mixture of relief and anxiety. Zulayho was starting from scratch, with no job and no savings. But she was not alone. Her family's home provided a safe harbor, and their emotional support was her greatest asset. Soon after the divorce, she discovered she was pregnant. This news, which could have been another source of despair, became her primary motivation. This child was a part of her, a reason to be strong, a symbol of a new beginning. She decided she would raise this child on her own, showering it with all the love and security she herself had been denied. Zulayho knew she needed to become financially independent. She began by taking on small jobs, whatever she could find. She used her skills in sewing, taking orders from neighbors to mend clothes or stitch new dresses. She would bake traditional pastries and sell them at the local market. The work was hard, and the income was modest, but each coin she earned was a symbol of her independence. It was her own money, earned through her own labor. This process of working and providing for herself began to rebuild her shattered self-esteem. She was no longer just a victim. She was a survivor, a provider, and a creator of her own destiny. When her daughter, whom she named Umida, meaning hope, was born, Zulayho's life found its true center. Holding her beautiful baby girl in her arms, she made a silent promise. She would build a world for her daughter that was safe, loving, and full of opportunities. She would teach her to be strong, to have a voice, and to never be afraid to stand up for herself. Raising a child alone was challenging, but the love she felt for Umida gave her a strength she never knew she possessed. Her daughter's laughter was the music that filled her small world, chasing away the last shadows of her past. Years passed, and Zulayho's hard work began to pay off. Her small sewing business grew. She saved enough money to rent a small workshop, and then she hired other women who, like her, needed a second chance. She became a small business owner, respected in her community not for the family she married into, but for her own resilience and success. She had rebuilt her life, brick by brick, with her own two hands. She had transformed from a frightened young woman into a confident, independent mother and employer, a testament to the incredible strength of the human spirit. As Zulayho established herself as a successful and respected woman in her community, her life took on a new rhythm. Her days were filled with the hum of sewing machines in her workshop, the chatter of the women she employed, and the sweet laughter of her growing daughter. She had created a small kingdom for herself, built on the foundations of hard work, courage, and compassion. People who had once whispered about her now spoke her name with admiration. They saw a woman who had faced adversity and had not only survived but thrived, creating opportunities for others along the way. In this new chapter of her life, love found its way back to her, though in a form she did not expect. A kind and gentle man, a local teacher who had long admired her strength and character, began to show interest in her. He saw her not as a divorced woman with a past, but as an extraordinary individual. He respected her independence and adored her daughter, Umida. His courtship was patient and respectful, a stark contrast to the life she had known before. He offered her a partnership, a life of shared respect and affection, a chance at the happiness she had long since given up on. Zulayho was touched by his sincerity and kindness. A part of her yearned for the companionship and love that he offered. She saw the possibility of a complete family, of giving her daughter a father figure. However, she had also grown to cherish her independence. She had fought so hard to build this life, to become the master of her own destiny. The thought of entering another marriage, of potentially sacrificing even a small part of her hard-won autonomy, made her hesitant. She had found a deep and abiding peace in her self-reliance, a quiet confidence that she was enough on her own. In the end, while she valued his friendship and respect, Zulayho chose to remain independent. Her priority was her daughter and the stable, peaceful life she had created for them. She had found love and respect, both from others and, most importantly, from within herself. She no longer needed a husband to feel complete or validated. Her happiness was not dependent on another person. She had found a profound sense of tranquility in her kingdom, and she was its undisputed queen. All she wanted now was to live in this peace, to watch her daughter grow, and to continue helping other women find their own strength. Zulayho's journey from a silent victim in a gilded cage to a beacon of strength in her community is a powerful story of transformation. Her life became a testament to the fact that it is possible to emerge from the darkest of nights into the bright light of a new day. She showed that a woman's worth is not defined by her marital status or the approval of society, but by her courage, her resilience, and her character. Her story is not one of bitterness or revenge, but one of healing, growth, and empowerment. She turned her pain into purpose, her scars into a source of strength. She became a source of hope for many other women in her town. Those who faced difficulties in their own lives would come to her workshop, not just for work, but for advice and encouragement. She would listen to their stories with empathy, sharing her own experiences not as a tale of woe, but as a lesson in survival. She taught them that they had a voice, that they had rights, and that they possessed an inner strength they might not yet recognize. She created a community of support, a sisterhood of women helping each other rise above their circumstances. Zulayho's greatest legacy is her daughter, Umida. She raised her to be a confident, intelligent, and compassionate young woman. She taught her that being a woman is a source of power, not weakness. Umida grew up watching her mother build a life from nothing, treat others with kindness, and stand tall in the face of adversity. Zulayho broke the cycle of silence and submission, ensuring that her daughter would walk a different path, one of freedom, self-respect, and limitless possibility. The hope she had named her daughter after had become the guiding principle of their lives. In the end, Zulayho's story is a profound lesson for all. It is a reminder that even in the most desperate of situations, there is always hope. It is a call to action for communities to listen, believe, and support victims of abuse, rather than silencing them with judgment. It is an inspiring tribute to the incredible strength of Uzbek women, who, like Zulayho, navigate complex cultural landscapes with grace and fortitude. Zulayho found her freedom, not by escaping her world, but by reshaping it. Her life shines as a bright light, illuminating a path for others to follow, a path leading from darkness to freedom, from sorrow to a lasting, well-earned peace.